You ever have one of those days when life just decides to flip you inside out? When you're standing there thinking you know who you are, and then someone looks you dead in the eye and tells you what they think you are, and the whole room laughs like it's the funniest thing in the world. Yeah, that was me, sitting there pretending it didn't burn, pretending their words were just air. But inside, I swear it felt like someone slammed the door on my chest and left me gasping for breath. And I kept asking myself, how many times do I let them do this before I finally say something? Before I finally stop playing the quiet one who takes the hit and keeps smiling? See, I'd been there before, more times than I could count, biting my tongue, letting the joke slide, thinking if I stayed small enough, maybe they'd forget I was there, maybe they'd move on to someone else. But the truth is they never forget. They circle back, and each time it gets sharper. Each time it carves a little deeper, until you start wondering if maybe that's all you'll ever be to them, a punchline. And I hated that thought, hated how it curled around my spine and whispered maybe they're right. Maybe I am what they say I am. And that's when I knew I couldn't let it go again. Not this time. So I walked back into that room, my palms sweaty, my heart pounding like it wanted out of my chest. But my face was steady, cold almost, like if I cracked even a little they'd smell the fear and tear me apart. I sat down, didn't blink, didn't smile, just waited, and the silence was thick. You could feel it stretching. And then one of them laughed, that stupid, nervous laugh, and he said, "Oh, look who's back. Ready for round two?" Everyone chuckled like it was rehearsed, like the script was written long before I arrived. But this time I didn't shrink, I didn't laugh along. I leaned in just a little and said, low enough that it made them lean closer, "Yeah, round two. And this time I'm not the one going down." It was like throwing ice water on the room. The smirks faded, the laughter died in their throats, and for a second, for the first time, I saw them flinch. And man, once that first crack appeared, the whole damn wall started crumbling. Because suddenly everything I'd swallowed, everything I'd buried, it all came spilling out. Not polished, not neat, just raw words jagged enough to cut the air between us. I told them I was done playing their joke, done letting them write the story while I stood silent in the background. And the more I spoke, the smaller they looked. Like without the laughter they weren't sure who they were anymore. One of them tried to brush it off, said I was being too sensitive. And the old me would have backed down right there, maybe even apologized. But instead I laughed, loud, real, sharp, and I swear it shook the walls. Because that's their trick, right? Gaslight you into thinking you're crazy for bleeding while they're the ones holding the knife. But I wasn't falling for it anymore. And maybe I should have stopped there. Maybe just walking out would have been enough. But I didn't. I held my ground, held the silence until it pressed on them heavier than it ever pressed on me. One by one they broke. Someone changed the subject. Another grabbed their phone, suddenly too busy to keep playing. And I realized right then the power wasn't theirs anymore. It was mine, because I wasn't playing the same game. That night I lay awake, replaying it all. Part of me terrified I'd started a war I couldn't win, wondering if tomorrow they'd come back sharper, meaner, ready to crush me twice as hard. But another part of me felt something I hadn't felt in years, free. Because once you stop needing their approval, once you stop begging for a seat at their table, you realize you don't even need the damn table. You can stand on your own 2 feet and eat just fine without them. And here's what hit me hardest. It wasn't about winning. It wasn't about revenge. It was about finally taking up the space that was mine all along. I didn't feel like a hero walking out. I didn't feel victorious. I just felt human, like for once I wasn't apologizing for existing. And maybe that's what courage really is, not some grand gesture, but that one small moment when you decide you're done being quiet. Still, I can't lie, the question lingers, did I do the right thing, or did I just make it harder for myself? Maybe tomorrow the whispers will start again. Maybe the smirks will return sharper than ever. But tonight I'm smiling, because for the first time the echo in my head isn't their voices. It's mine, steady, unshaken, and damn if that isn't worth more than any fake peace I ever had. And that's where I'll leave it, with the question that won't leave me alone. Tell me, if it were you, would you have stood up, or would you have walked away and let them laugh one more time? because I can't stop wondering which choice is braver. You'd think after a moment like that the story would just end, clean break, like the credits rolling on a movie, but real life doesn't work that way. It never ties things up neat. It keeps poking at you, testing if you meant what you said or if it was just adrenaline talking. And sure enough, the very next morning I walked in and felt every eye on me. The weight heavier than usual, not the playful kind of attention. No, this was sharp, like they were all waiting to see if I'd fold, if last night was just some slip they could laugh off later. I sat down, slow, deliberate. Because if you move too quick, they'll call it nerves. If you move too slow, they'll smell fear. So you walk that razor line. And I swear my heartbeat was so loud I was sure they could hear it. But I kept my face calm. Calm enough that one of them finally cracked first and said, "So, still mad about last night?" With that crooked grin that used to own me. Except this time, I didn't even blink. I just smiled, leaned back, and said, "Not mad, just awake." And I swear you could feel the whole room shift, like they weren't sure if I was dangerous now or if they'd simply underestimated me all along. The funny part is, once you break the script, they don't know their lines anymore. They fumble, they stall, and that's when you see how much of their power was just smoke, all hot air and cheap laughs. One guy tried to test me, said something slick under his breath, but before I could even answer, someone else told him to shut up. Yeah, the same crowd that used to laugh the loudest. Now they were uncomfortable, like my words from last night were still echoing, still cutting into the silence. That's when I realized I hadn't just changed the way I saw them. I'd changed the way they saw themselves. And that's a shift you can't undo. But here's the twist nobody tells you about. When you stand up once, you don't just free yourself, you start pulling others with you. Later that day, a girl I barely spoke to came up, looked me dead in the eye, and whispered, "Thank you." I didn't even know what for at first, but then she told me how she'd been the quiet one too, how she'd been carrying her own scars, waiting for someone to show it was possible to fight back. And hearing her say that, man, it hit me harder than any insult ever had, because it meant maybe this wasn't just my story, maybe it was ours. Maybe every time one of us stood up, it gave someone else permission to breathe a little freer. Of course, not everyone liked the shift. By the end of the week, I got pulled aside, subtle little warning, "You're being disruptive," they said, like me refusing to play the clown was somehow chaos. And that's when it got real, when I had to ask myself, am I ready for the price of this? Am I ready to lose comfort? Maybe even lose my place, just to hold my ground? And honestly, I didn't know the answer. Not then, not even now, but I knew one thing. I couldn't go back, because once you taste your own voice, silence feels like poison. So maybe this isn't a clean story. Maybe it doesn't end with applause or me riding off into some golden sunset. Maybe it ends with me still fighting, still pushing, still figuring out who I am without their approval. But you know what? Maybe that's the point. Life doesn't hand you neat endings. It hands you choices, messy, heavy, terrifying choices, and all you can do is decide which weight you're willing to carry. And that's where I'll leave you again, with the choice hanging in the air. If tomorrow was the day they told you to shrink or walk, would you take the seat they offered, small and safe? Or would you stand, even if it meant standing alone? Because that's the question I wake up with every damn day, and I still don't know if I've got it right.